Welcome to the Organisational Inclusionist. I'm your host, Grace Mosuro. In this podcast series, we'll be delving deep into the pressing issues surrounding equality, diversity, and inclusion in both the workplace and the broader world. My goal is to foster understanding, inspire change, and amplify the voices of those advocating for a more inclusive and equitable society. Throughout this series, I'll be engaging in candid discussions with leaders, experts, activists, and changemakers from various fields. We'll explore the challenges, successes, and evolving landscapes of equality, diversity, and inclusion. From dismantling systematic biases to promoting equal opportunities for all, we'll touch on a broad range of topics. But we won't stop at discussing problems. We'll actively seek out solutions and actionable steps to drive positive change. Our aim is to inspire and empower you, our listeners, to take an active role in making the world a better place for everyone. This is the Organisational Inclusionist. Let's get started. Hey, welcome everyone to today's episode of the Organisational Inclusionist. My name is Grace Mosuro and I'm your host. And today I am joined by Veronica, who is just amazing. I am going to get Veronica to introduce herself shortly. But we met in January, I think it was, at a coaching session that we were both at. And Veronica was just someone I was drawn to. She is authentic. She is warm, she's really passionate, and she's obviously great at what she does. So today we have come together to discuss Veronica's great work in coaching women in leadership, and also to just have a broader discussion around why, as women in leadership, we benefit from and need, work like the work that Veronica does, and coaching and advocating for. It's unfortunate that we do still need that, but, discussing in detail why there is a need for that and why organisations should continue to invest in that. Welcome, Veronica. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a great introduction. I feel honoured. I'm quite emotional already.
Thank you so much for joining me. I would love it if you could just introduce yourself to our listeners, tell them who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I never know how to start really. So I would just start with I am an executive coach. So that's the job that I do would be executive coach and consultant, working with leaders in the corporate space mainly. And yeah, at the moment working in a number of organizations, just helping leaders become more conscious, more connected, more authentic, and ultimately transform so that they can also help transform the organizations they lead to create cultures where everyone can thrive and organizations that can be part of the solution to the problems we have rather than part of the problem or adding to the problems.
Amazing. And what's the name of your company?
Yeah, my company is called Values Leadership Consulting, which also stands for VL are my initials. So I wanted to make sure that there was a bit of me in it, talking about authenticity. Yeah.
I love that. So what led you to, become a woman in leadership coach? And I know you don't just coach women, but I know you're really passionate about coaching women. What is it that has driven that passion? And what's led you to continue this piece of work and to advocate for women in the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you. So my background is in the corporate world, actually. So I was a leader in a big multinational called Mondelez International. It's one of the largest food manufacturers in the world. I started in the previous version of that company, that was Cadbury, the chocolate company. And I was in the corporate space for 20 odd years. And in that time, I found a number of things. One, I found it really challenging at times to navigate the culture of the organization. I was very lucky at times to be led by some really inspirational leaders that fundamentally for me, they were interested in people. But I also was also experienced other leaders and other cultures where that was very different, and I could see how quickly leaders could destroy really great cultures very, very quickly by just leading from fear, reactively, and being really unconscious in a way. So during my own journey, coaching played a pivotal part of my own leadership journey, but also my decision to jump from the corporate world into building my own business and doing the work I do today. And so I just, in finding my path, coaching was critical for me, both while I was in the organization, but also in terms of really understanding who I was and what I wanted, and giving me the courage to stay true to myself. And so I just want to do that for others now.
I love that. I was at an event the other day and they were talking a lot about how people become accidental leaders. So they're really good at a job, and then they stay in an organization for so long that they end up being promoted and promoted and promoted, and they end up managing people without a clue as to how to do it and not knowing how to do it. And I think when we're in situations like that and we are being led by people who potentially haven't been led by great leaders themselves, there's a circle of toxicity that can be created within organizations. And I read a statistic as well, I think, that said over 50% of people said, it might have even been as high as 72%, which is very specific, but said that they would, a bad manager would be a reason for them to leave an organization. And I think sometimes organizations and leadership can really underestimate the impact of good or bad leadership on a team, and on retention of amazing staff. So what have you found in your work in coaching women in organizations?
I mean, I think we are very much the product of our lived experiences and learned experiences. And as I started to work on myself and do the inner work, I started realizing just how much our childhood experiences impact and shape who we are, but also how quickly you get out in the world and you start receiving messages about who you should be and how you need to behave to belong, really, ultimately, to be safe, to belong, to be able to do your job and be valued for the job that you do. And so I started really noticing how much of my self-talk had this hint of not enough, just not being enough, not being good enough, not doing enough. And I started paying attention to just the messages that we all receive in life about that, and specifically with women, just how the patriarchy does a very good job at keeping us really not taking a space, both literally and metaphorically. I remember there was a campaign a few years ago where they were campaigning around bringing awareness to the way that women are labeled when they show characteristics that are traditionally applied to men. And it suddenly dawned on me just the fact that I've always been an advocate for myself, especially my background is in finance, and I never had any problem in going back and asking for a pay rise if I felt that was the fair thing to do. But I was always given the sort of pushy, aggressive label. And so just started to pay attention. I think paying attention to all of the messages that we keep receiving day in, day out through the media, through our families and friends, the communities that we form part, the work, about who we need to be, and noticing wanting to break free from that, but finding it difficult at times depending on which environment you're in.
And I think that is, so spot on. I've seen so many reports that talk about the fact that women traditionally don't negotiate their salaries, or, women won't apply for a job unless they fit 80% of the job description, for
Yes.
example, whereas men only need to, I think it's something like 40%, if not less. I wouldn't be surprised if it was less. And just that feeling that women have of, I need to become a certain person in the workplace to progress. So I either need to behave like a man does, or I need to behave like a woman does, in order to fit into this space or to be
Yes.
heard.
Yes.
We've got even famous people, or a famous politician like Margaret Thatcher, who discovered very early on in her political career that in order to be heard, she would have to lower her tone. So she actually spent time working on
Just
her voice so that
practicing.
she didn't sound shrill, so that
Yes.
men would listen and hear her when she speaks. And that in itself is just, it's crazy, but it speaks to just how much women need to adapt in the workplace to kind of overcome the patriarchy. And I don't know,
Yes.
I wouldn't say that we're there yet. We definitely need policies like, policies that think about women in the workplace, etc., and how you create a more equitable space. There's definitely still a need. What are some of the barriers that you experience in coaching women in leadership? So, what are some of the barriers that you might face, maybe from their leaders who are men, or even from some of the women themselves that are being coached by you?
Yeah. Well, I think that I love that question, and I think I'll take it as two different questions. So, one of the main issues that I still see, which is why I always say I don't just coach women, because while I feel one extremely nourishing for me, very much needed, that is only part of the challenge. And so for me,
Mm,
it's around really transforming organizational cultures so that women
yeah.
can thrive there. And so the biggest challenge I would say is it's when you get a sense that this is just a plaster on an issue.
Mm,
I always talk about like an iceberg. And above the line, what you see is the sort of investment in these kind of programs, putting money aside and investment aside to really support, in this case, women. The below the
mm,
line is the mentality, the mindset, and is the sort of, do you believe fundamentally in equality, and therefore are willing to put equity at the heart, but fundamentally that equality as a mindset, as a true belief that this is not just
yeah.
a hey. So how I would put it is, let's just give them some money to the women because to sort them out, as opposed
Mm,
to, which is the way I work, and this is fundamental to my belief and the work I do, which is change starts from within. So do you want to build a
yeah.
more equitable culture? Do you want to create a place where women thrive and where everyone thrives? What needs to change within you, right? And what is it in
Mm,
me that I am unaware of, that is part of how I see the world, that I might need to test, get curious about,
yeah.
go deeper, understand, because it's within all of us, men and women. And so the biggest barrier to these things is, as a coach, is it's that sort of commitment from the leadership to making these, to get curious and own the challenge, not just throw money at the problem.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what ends up happening, if you do a program where you just invest in coaching women, and there isn't an element of cultural transformation, that women will leave. They'll suddenly realize what they've been putting up with, and they'll just go, do you know what? I can choose. Because fundamentally, part of the work I do, whether it's with women, with men, or with anyone, it's helping them see that they've given the car keys to someone else to drive of their own life. And it's sort of like, go grab the keys, sit in the driver's seat, choose the music, who's coming with you, where is the car going? And that then means, where am I? And is this the place where I can be myself, where I can bring my whole self to work, where I'm welcomed and I can really truly thrive? So that's the biggest challenge. And then for women, what I do notice is, still, I don't really like the word microaggressions, because I don't see them as micro in any way. So, bias, aggressions, microaggressions, if you want to call them microaggressions, but fundamentally bias, and how exhausting it is one of the barriers. The other one that I see a lot is this whole challenge with the caring load, and how that not only at home, but how that translates at work. The amount of women out there doing, and you and I have talked about these in other conversations, but the amount of women in the workplace taking care for free of caring activities, because you are the empathetic one, because you are the one that knows how to listen. And this is exhausting, and it's taking time away from doing other things that women are also interested in doing. And it's never going to change if other people don't take on those responsibilities. So that's the other one. And then the third one is, which I've noticed a lot more lately, even when flexibility is in place, even when people are investing in programs and investing in helping women progress, I have a lot of clients and a lot of friends that are leaving the workplace because they just don't feel that they have a values alignment. The culture of the place, fundamentally what the business is about and cares about, it's too low a level. It's a sort of, let's make money, let's sell more. And they're looking for something that makes a difference. Which is, I think, what we're seeing, a lot of women leaving and starting their own businesses to really try and change things from the outside. My worry is that we'll end up with no one, if everyone leaves. So I'm just here trying to do the two, how do we support organizations to create those cultures so that women don't leave, but also how do we support women to really be who they are? Stop morphing, whether it's playing a small or trying to become who they're not, because it's the only way that they feel they can be heard and they can make a difference.
Absolutely. I think it's so important as well. So there's a couple of things you said that really stood out for me. So one of them being around the need to transform cultures rather than just bring in training and coaching to fix the problem. I think what a number of organizations have done historically is they've brought that training in to stick a plaster on, like you've said, without thinking actually there's a bigger issue that we need to fix here. And obviously in the work that I do, I harp on all the time about, I'll happily deliver training and coaching for you, but can we start with your inclusion strategy? Do you even have one? And if you do have one, was it written in 2020 or 2021? Because if so, it needs to be revisited.
It needs to be,
and because I just think organizations really need to understand that you need to really build an inclusion strategy that thinks about your intentions as an organization, but also speaks to the fact that you live and breathe what you're talking about in the activity that you then go on to commission for your employees. And, that's a huge piece. I think the other piece that you said as well that was so important was around the fact that people are waking up to their value in the workplace, and the fact that actually historically the way that I've been treated hasn't been okay, and I now know that and I no longer will take it and I will leave. And I'll either
Mm.
go and start my own business, or I will join an organization whose values align with my own. And I think that in itself speaks to the impact of getting it right with inclusion, and really making sure that as an organization, you genuinely care about it. I do talk a lot about the business case for inclusion, but I speak about that because usually I'm speaking with people that want to tell me about their inclusion budget, and they don't have enough budget for this, and I'm trying to get across to them the cost benefit of spending money to create real inclusion, and then the benefit that your organization will get from that. But it's also really important for organizations to understand that it's not just about what you get, it's about what your employees get, because they need to see the
Absolutely.
added value as well. They need to see a
Yeah.
reason to stay in the organization. So I'm really, really glad that you mentioned that, actually, because I
Yeah.
think I do still feel like organizations need to appreciate that inclusion leads to retention and engagement, and then increased profits, even though I'm not necessarily bothered about that, but it does directly correlate.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that is a hard one for me too, because you do it because you have to do it. Starting
Yeah,
with numbers and profit, and it's sort of like we shouldn't be there. And that's the bit that
no,
speaks to the why of the organization, and
definitely.
if we start the conversation in the what's the return on investment of these, then I've learned now that that's not a place for me. It absolutely, I'm happy. I'm a former finance director. I am happy to talk about numbers and all of that. But this is about way more than that. And if that's where the conversation starts and where it keeps coming back to, then I think fundamentally from a values point of view, we've got a clash, and I'm just not the person for you. And that takes courage, but it's part of the reason for me to come out of the corporate world and start my own business, is to be able to stay true to my values and work with leaders that I genuinely believe have that ambition of making the world a better place. They might be a bit lost, they might not really know what that actually means, but at least they're open to that vulnerability of saying, I
Absolutely.
don't know, I don't know about this, but I have got that desire or that ambition.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's funny as well, because we spoke before we started this recording about kind of what it's like as female entrepreneurs, and this, us being aware of the value that we add to organizations as well. And I shared kind of sometimes, anxieties around, being comfortable with my pricing and being
Yeah.
comfortable with the value that I provide with that price.
Yeah.
And also not buckling to many efforts to kind of get me to discount my price or to charge less, etc. I think there is a piece, particularly for organizations that say they're really serious about inclusion, is to also think about what that looks like, not just within their organizations, but also with partners that they work with to support them to create inclusion. Is like, actually, if we live and breathe this and we believe this, it should show in every area of our work, including commissioning. And I just think, as women, we are often asked to discount, or, can you
Oh,
talk us through why you
yeah.
charge that,
Yeah.
etc. And it's just, it's mind blowing that it's still happening in 2024, but it's still very much a lived experience of female entrepreneurs and CEOs, etc., having to justify their value in the spaces that they're in.
Yeah. And I notice it comes up a lot, especially for those of us who haven't got huge organizations, but might be dealing with bigger organizations. And I must say, um, I have reminded a few organizations of that reality and said, I'm going to need to set these terms because this is the reality. I am not a huge organization. I'm very lucky that I have a very good network of associate coaches and I can do work in large corporations. But the truth is that we are entrepreneurs, and there is
Mm.
a huge value and benefit of working with those. But we do need them to also, as women, voice what are our needs and stay true to that,
Yeah,
rather than start second guessing ourselves and getting into this mindset of who am I to be asking for something or negotiating, or because we've been told that, that's not pretty. A woman that
exactly.
negotiates hard is like, oh, she's a bit aggressive, is the word that I've heard mentioned a few times. And it's like, well, I realized a long time ago that no one was going to do it for me. And so if I wanted something, I had to ask for it and accept if the
Definitely.
answer was no, but I would at least have to have the courage to ask. So
Definitely.
yeah.
I think it's interesting because my daughter does that. Like she's very much, if you don't ask, you don't get. So she will ask for any and everything, and she probably hears no 10 times a day, but she'll still continue to ask. And I remember speaking to her dad about it the other day, and he was like, "Doesn't it frustrate you that she just won't stop asking?" I said, "Don't get me wrong, in the moment it frustrates me, but I never want her to lose that energy. I want her to go into the world of work knowing that she should ask.
I love
And the
that.
answer might be no, but that's fine.
I
Keep
love
asking
that.
because
It remind
like, she's just the perfect, like, if I need a reminder to ask for what I want, my 12-year-old is the perfect reminder. Like, she has no issue asking for what she wants.
I was definitely a kid like that, and there is this story of me being quite young and wanting to get a pair of red shiny shoes, and my mother had said no, and I kept asking and asking and asking, and in the end she said, write a poem and tell me why you want them. And I did. And that poem got read out at my wedding years later.
I love that she kept it.
Oh, you red shoes. I can imagine you in my on my feet. Like it was like I went for it. So
I
maybe there is
love that.
something about, from a young age, I have been someone that that hasn't really taken no for an answer.
Mm.
So good on your daughter.
No, I think there's something in that as well. I think as parents, as mums, it's really important that we nurture and keep that spirit in our children because
Yes.
particularly if we're raising women, or I'm raising I don't want to say soon to be because that will make me cry, but at some point she's going to be a black woman in the world of work.
Yes.
And I never want her to lose that spirit of knowing that she deserves to have things and she should ask for those things. And I just think as parents, because we're so busy and tired, it's so easy to kill that spirit. And I have to speak to myself regularly that no, I want her to keep this spirit and I want to nurture it and encourage it because there will be plenty of no's further down the line. And she needs to learn the resilience to keep asking and to keep striving because, we know that once you give up, that's it.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I'm raising three future white men. And therefore, I am very passionate about doing work that helps to create cultures in which, they can thrive too. So
Mm,
to make sure that they are very aware of the privilege that they have by the
mm,
fact that they are white men, but also how trapped they also are, how the patriarchy will do everything possible to keep them disconnected from themselves,
yeah.
from their emotions. Even the other day, I was asking my oldest son, it's like, when was the last time you cried? I'm like, damn, why are you crying? Like, but I think lately in the last few years we've seen a lot a lot more, maybe not enough in my view, but a lot more around making sure women, um, see role models of being able to do whatever they want.
Mm,
And, especially in the sports, women football taking a big place in sort of public life, etc. And I love it. And I would like to see more a message in which men do caring and are able to express emotions and
yeah,
do the emotional, develop their emotional intelligence and are able to be fully human.
yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
it is really damaging for them too. And hence why, I'm passionate about, supporting women, especially women that are in corporate environments like I was, and being
Mm,
the support that I had at times, but also the one that I would have liked at other
yeah,
times. I also want to make sure my kids are able to be who they are rather than feel trapped by these
yeah,
system that benefits from them being completely disconnected from themselves.
absolutely, absolutely. What would you say to organizations wondering how they can better support the women in their workforces?
I would say, I have two things to my work, or two beliefs that are fundamental to my work. One is organizations don't transform, people do.
Mm,
And the other is the change we want
that's
to
my
see out
poetry
there.
clip. That was perfect.
And the change we want to see in the world will start from within.
Mm,
And therefore, the the thing you can do is do the work on yourself. If you're a leader
yeah.
and are privileged to have a position of influence and are genuinely wanting to create inclusive organizations, it starts with you.
Definitely.
It's as leaders evolve and transform, the organizations they lead and the world around them will transform. And so, it's about what is it in me? Have I
Mm,
explored my own bias, my own relationship with the patriarchy in this case, speaking about gender in particular, but beyond that, gender, just the work starts with you. The culture
definitely.
is the values, beliefs, and behaviors of the leaders. And so invest in that. If you haven't got a coach, get a coach. If you are working with an organization, make sure it's one that is going to challenge you, that is going to
Mm,
really help hold the mirror and know that it's the people within the organization that transform the organization.
definitely. And I would add as well, just to the piece around, people are the ones that transform, and as leaders getting that coaching. I also think being transparent about the fact that you're having coaching is
Yes,
really important too. Sharing that with your
yes,
organization, because, all too often we see the CEO and we think, oh, they're the finished article, or, they
that's
they
it.
aren't interested. But hearing that your CEO or your MD or director is having coaching to make them a better leader or a more inclusive leader is so powerful. So I
It
just
is.
really encourage that. I think as people, we're sometimes scared to say that, we're getting help with something, when actually that is what humanizes us, is people seeing that we know we're not the finished article, and we are doing the
Exactly.
work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a couple of things. So that sentence, organizations that transform people do, is a sentence by a gentleman called Richard Barrett, and he has
Mm,
a model of values that I'm super passionate about, accredited in, and that I use a lot because it helps bring that consciousness and coherence to what are the beliefs and the values that I have, and how do they translate into behaviors then, and matching the what I say with what I do and how I show up, which is fundamental. And for that, you often need someone to hold the mirror. And leadership can be very lonely, and it tends to be quite lonely. The higher you up you go, the less you hear about how people see you. So having a partner that can help you hold that mirror, it's fundamental. And then the other thing is that there's actually a ton of research now around how, as adults, we continue to develop and grow psychologically. We're not done when we're grown up. We continue to grow. And so to think that you are done, it's not true. We all continue that journey. And therefore, having a partner that can help you on that journey of growth I think is a huge privilege, and one of the gifts that anyone can give themselves. So if you are in an organization that is willing to invest in that, I would say take it up.
Definitely. Veronica, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me so quickly. Me too.
I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think it's going to be really impactful for leaders that want to get it if they don't already get it, and just for anyone really that really wants to just hear about the lived experience of women and the work that's being done to progress that. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Grace.
This podcast is brought to you by Acquaintance Consulting. We'd love it if you could take a minute at the end of this podcast to follow, subscribe, whichever is easier or available for you on the platform that you're listening to us on. We're really keen to grow this channel and really impact equality, diversity and inclusion across the world. And with your support, we can do just that.